and welcome everybody to our talk about the making of Tetris Effect. As you hopefully know, Tetris Effect, the new take on the classic puzzle game for PS4, PSVR. If you don't know what Tetris Effect is, if you know what Tetris is and you see this talk, you're going to get the idea, I think, pretty quick. So the format for the talk is going to be roughly in the chronological order that we took through development. And then we're going to summarize at the end with some key takeaways that we each kind of felt like we learned from the project. But this is really Ishihara-san's talk, the director of the project. But we're going to be playing musical chairs a bit and switching back and forth to the podium. So yeah, we wanted to just all introduce ourselves at the top here. I'll start. My name is Mcdonald. My title is VP Biz Dev and Production at Enhance, but we're a really small shop, so we all do lots of other jobs. I do some PR, marketing. I'm going to talk a lot about focus groups that we ran for Tetris Effect, that sort of stuff. My background is in the media. I started off on video game magazines, so you can kind of get a rough idea how old I am. Electronic Gaming Monthly, official PlayStation magazine. I switched to online, ran the video side of a site called oneup.com, and then moved to Japan about 10 years ago and to the dev side of the industry, where I worked with some friends at a company called 84, which is a terrible company filled with garbage people. Stay away. But one of them is up here on stage with us. That's Graham Howard. Thank you very much. Graham is going to be doing interpretation for Ishihara-san. So yeah, anyway, 84, I was lucky enough to work on big titles for Nintendo, Capcom, Imagine Makeup Artist, that sort of thing. And that's where I first started working with Mizuguchi-san, consulting on what would become Res Infinite. That was about 3 years ago. And eventually when I left 84, I ended up at Enhance and have been there ever since. So with that, Ishihara-san, I'll hand it over.
Good
afternoon, everyone. My name is Takashi Ishihara.
過去にチャイルド・オブ・エデン、ルミネス、レズ・インフィニットといった音楽とビジュアルを融合させたゲームにコンセプトアーティスト、アートディレクターとして関わってきました。
In the past, I've worked as concept artist and art director on games that fuse music and visuals, such as Child of Eden, Luminous, and Res Infinite.
今回はテトリスエフェクトの開発ディレクターとして担当します。よろしくお願いします。
And for Tetris Effect, I acted as director. It's nice to meet you all.
Hello, I'm Taziya Mizuguchi. I'm a founder of Enhance, and I've been in this industry for long years, pretty long years, since 1990. So I joined to Sega in 1990, and I produced Sega Rally and arcade games, racing games, and Res, Space Channel 5, Child of Eden, Luminous, and so on. And this title, Tetris Effect, this is my 20th produced title. So yeah, thank you for coming today. So let me talk about the Tetris Effect. So the beginning of the story, I met Hank Rogers long years ago, who is the CEO and chairman of that Tetris company. And he's living in Big Island, Hawaii, in the United States. And so I met him a few times in the Big Island. And we watched the stars and, watched the fires and the huge, the big nature. He's living in a big, huge ranch, and so the many horses and sheep and many
wild compound,
animals.
Yeah. They have a nice little compound there.
Yeah, it's an amazing, crazy place. And so we had a discussion like, "Hey, Gooch." So he called me Gooch. So some people call me Ms. and some people call me Gooch and whatever. You can call me any. So he said, "Hey Gooch, why don't you make a Tetris with the music?" So he played Res and the Luminous, and so he asked me, that kind of things. So and yeah, but that is luminous. So he said, yeah, I know, but the Tetris is a very special mechanism. It has, like, he's talking about zone experience of Tetris. Have you played Tetris? Yeah, I think it's the most famous game in the world, and so you know about the zone experience. You concentrate to play, you don't think, just feel, and then you can play without thinking. So this is a very strong experience and a very special, unique, the point of the Tetris. So, and we had a discussion, the mixing, the music, sounds, and the visual, and new type of storytelling. We may make the new type of game, and also, with the new technology like VR. So maybe, we can make a totally new thing. So this is just beginning, the kind of, story we have. Then I came back, oh, yeah, this is I got the keywords from Hank, like Tetris music, feel good, and feel zen, and feel in the zone. That means, flow. So that kind of inspiration is getting the bigger in my mind. And then coming back to Tokyo, and I met Ishihara. So yeah, and I asked him, okay, please give me some design and drawing, start to draw some inspirations. And he gave me some very key, great art like this. This is very special. The first, one of the art. So, you can see the sounds and the visual, the mixing. You erase, disappear the line, and then you get the sound effects and some smoke, fire coming, and the moving with the music. And if you can see this with the VR, you can imagine what's kind of happening. And he gave me that kind of art. It's very unique, and to feel some story and emotional. And like this, feel the music, feel the atmosphere. And this is really trippy, psychedelic, but moving with the music and sounds and watching the 3D. So this is the spacey galaxy. And then, so we have a pretty long pre-production before we make the game. Just only, the play in my mind, your mind, the play and the play and the play and the play. And you listen to the sound of music. And the music react with the visual particles and moving. Yeah, this is the, we need the imagination. But we have that kind of a period by small people like me and Ishihara, and sometimes the sound designer. But we have a pretty long pre-production. I think we had どれぐらいあったっけ? 2年 1年半ぐらい? Almost 2 years pre-production. Just before, we make the demo, before interactive demo. So I think this is a very unique style for Enhance. And after all, if we want to move, okay, let's make the movie first. So this is the first movie we made. And so we had the concept like this. Okay, so this is let's call the project Zen Tetris. So this is a code name, but Zen Tetris, and this is kind of an image. So the Mark made this image.
So I asked, Ishihara-san to make this image, and this and kind of the movie, I think, helped a lot getting everybody on the same page. It also helped when we were pitching it to partners and stuff like that. But to Mizuguchi-san's point, we would not have had that if we hadn't have spent 2 years. If they hadn't spent 2 years, I came on in the middle of it in pre-production, and so that's one of the things that Enhanced we really believe in. And our studio structure allows us to do that, where we can have just a couple people noodling on something for a couple years, getting the art really right. And so this was, we were going to kind of go this direction for marketing. The name of the game we thought was going to be Zen Tetris. We'll talk about that later. But one thing just to add before we now go to Ishihara-san was that the movie was great, and everything that Miz was talking about, I was fully on board with. But the one thing that you didn't see in that movie was any new kind of gameplay, right? It was all very stock standard Tetris, which maybe that's okay. It certainly looked really cool, especially in VR. Maybe that would be enough. But from very early on, there was this question of, well, is it okay to not have some new kind of gameplay thing? Anyway, that's kind of foreshadowing. So with that, why don't we switch over to Ishihara-san?
Okay. So then, I talked with him, with Ishihara-kun. So, and me and Mark, so we had a discussion, let's ask to Ishihara as director. This is his first director project. So, I want to introduce him a little bit. So he was high school student, high school kids, when I was made a res, first res, 2001. And after graduating the school, he chased me to Sega. But I quit Sega and I moved to the Q Entertainment. But he worked in Sega maybe 2-3 years.
It was right after he got to Sega. Mizuguchi-san promptly left Sega. And the whole reason that he came to Sega was to work with Mizuguchi-san. But in Japan, you can't just pick up and leave, especially in Japan, after you start working somewhere. So he was stuck there for at least a couple of years.
Yeah, I hope he's not a stalker. But so he did a really good job in the project, Child of Eden. So he drew the 3,000 art. That was amazing. And he also did the Resident Infinite art director. And then, it's a really good time now. So Ishihara, go. So, I want to introduce Ishihara-kun.
私はその後、一人で開発の準備を少しずつ始めていきました。
So after that, I went about preparing for development to start, all by myself, a little bit at a time.
こちらは簡単な仕様書ですが、VR 空間の構築に必要なレイアウト情報です。
And what we have here is a fairly simple design document, but it contains all the layout information necessary for structuring spaces in VR.
顔の絵がプレイヤーになります。この仕様書では、マンタが目の前を2匹泳ぎ、下からバブルが上がってくることを表しています。
The face you see here is the player, and you can see a representation of 2 manta rays that are swimming before the player's eyes, and you also have bubbles rising up from below.
これはテトリミのブロックの表現を表したものです。
And so here we have some representations of tetramino blocks.
テトリミノを消すと美しい水のパーティクルが空間に飛んでいくのをイメージしています。
What I had in mind was that beautiful water particles would fly out whenever you cleared some tetraminos.
これはイルカのステージの仕様書です。
And here we have a design document for the dolphin stage.
これは空に風車が浮かんでいるステージです。VR で空を飛んでいるような体験をイメージしています。
This is the stage where you have windmills floating in the sky. I had been imagining an experience where you could fly through the sky in VR.
そして最終的に約30種類のすべてのステージの仕様書を揃えました。
And eventually, I had design documents for all of the 30-odd stages in the game.
この時期、エンハンスではレズインフィニットの構想や開発を行っていたため、テトリスのプリプロダクションは水面下で進め、作業はトータルで2年近くにも及びました。
At this time, things were quite busy at Enhance due to the ongoing planning and development of Res Infinite, so pre-production of Tetris continued behind the scenes for almost 2 whole years.
仕様を考えていく段階で、サウンドのイメージも合わせて考えていきました。
When thinking about the game's design, I was also considering how best to present sound as well.
なぜかというと、この時点でビジュアルとサウンドがどう演出上で融合するのかをイメージしておかないと、最終的な演出の深みが出ず、プレイの気持ちよさが生まれないためです。
If you don't have an idea of how visuals and sound will come together in presentation at this point in time, said presentation will ultimately lack depth, and it prevents a gameplay experience that truly feels great.
そしてレズインフィニットの開発が終了した2016年の末、テトリスエフェクトの開発がスタートしました。
And so, as development of Res Infinite came to a close at the end of 2016, so began the development of Tetris Effect.
まずはプロジェクト開始から3ヶ月で深海の中でテトリスをプレイするというデモを作成しました。こちらの映像をご覧ください。
Our starting point was a prototype that allowed the player to enjoy Tetris in a deep sea environment, which we made within 3 months of starting the project. We have a video of just that, so let's take a look.
VR ということもあり、背景やブロックはすべて 3D で作成しています。
Since the game is being created for VR, we made absolutely everything in 3D, from the blocks to the background.
空間を泳ぐ魚の群れやマンタやクジラがプレイヤーの周りを泳ぎます。
The space is filled with schools of fish, manta rays, and whales, all of which swim around the environs.
その他、大量のパーティクルや 3D サウンドなども活かし、全体的にとてもリッチな作りにしました。
We also made use of large amounts of particles and 3D sound as well, making it a very rich production overall.
しかし、大きな問題が2つ見つかりました。
However, we encountered 2 very big problems.
1つ目の問題は、エンハンスの作品作りで最も重要だと感じられているポイントの気持ちよさを感じることができませんでした。
Our first problem was that the game simply didn't feel good, which is something we at Enhance value above all else in our creative process.
それどころか、全く逆の疲労感、眠気、集中力が続かないといった状態が起きていました。
It was actually worse than just not feeling good. It actively induced feelings of drowsiness, fatigue, and caused people to have difficulty concentrating.
ランチタイムが終わってテストプレイを行っていると、気がついたら VR をかぶりながら眠ってしまうということもよくありました。
There were often times where, when sitting down for a test play after lunchtime, I would wake up to find out I had passed out with the VR helmet on.
圧倒的に気持ちよさを生み出す演出の表現力が足りていなかったため、私たちが使っているシナスタジアエンジンを強化する必要があると感じました。
The game lacked the presentation and expressiveness necessary to inspire something that feels great in the player, and I believed the answer was to improve our Synesthesia engine.
シナスタジアエンジンとは、レズインフィニットで使用していたパーティクルや音を生み出す私たちが作っている独自のシステムです。
The Synesthesia engine, by the way, is a proprietary system of ours that we use for creating sound and particles, and we used it for Res Infinite as well.
2つ目の問題は、テトリミノを操作することにプレイヤーの意識が大きく割かれ、ビジュアルやサウンドを全くと言っていいほど感じ取れない状態でした。
Our second problem was the player's mental energy was largely dedicated to manipulating the tetramino blocks, to the point where the player was, when you get down to it, basically not taking in any of the visuals or sound at all.
これは決してオーバーな言い方ではなく、魚やマンタがいたこと、歌が流れていたことすら記憶に残っていない人もたくさんいました。
And I'm honestly not exaggerating here. There were many people who could not recall that there were fish and manta rays swimming around, or that there was even music playing at all.
まさにこの体験は今までと何も変わらない普通のテトリスでした。
What we had created was essentially regular old Tetris.
So yeah, and just to add to that, so what he was saying was absolutely true about we had that happen in user testing where it was, what did you think of the space whale stage? And people were like, what? There was a space whale? I totally didn't see the space whale. So people were not getting it at all unless, and sometimes it's kind of problem maybe 2.5 that we had, which is if the manta ray, people wouldn't notice the manta rays at all, but if the manta ray dared to, even for like a split second, cross over the playfield, the matrix, it was the first thing when people took off the headset was like, get that fucking manta ray out of this fucking game. That thing is driving me crazy. It's terrible. I want it out. Destroy them all. So there were a few problems right at the start.
まずこの、ごめんなさい。私はこの2つ目の問題を最優先で解決する必要があると感じ、まずはこの問題から取り掛かりました。
Of the two problems that we had on our plate, I felt like the second one was what needed to be addressed first and foremost. So that's where I started.
まずこの現象は VR をかぶった状態では人間の脳はリアルな世界だと錯覚してしまうためだと思いました。
I figured this phenomenon must be a result of how, when wearing a VR helmet, the human brain is deluded into believing that the VR space it sees is the real world.
プレイヤーは自分にとって不要な情報を排除し、テトリミノを操作する一点に意識を絞っているように感じました。
It seemed to me that the player would discard all information they believed to be of no use to them, instead concentrating entirely on one single point, manipulating tetraminos.
問題の解決に向けていくつかチャレンジをしました。
And so in an attempt to solve this issue, I tried a number of things.
演出をもっと派手なものにしてみたり、プレイするアングルを大きく変えてみたり、しかし演出を優先すればテトリスプレイの邪魔となり、テトリスのプレイを優先すれば演出を失うという繰り返しでした。
I had experimented with ideas like making the presentation more over the top, or drastically changing the angle at which the game is played, but we ended up going back and forth between prioritizing presentation, which would get in the way of actually playing Tetris, and prioritizing Tetris gameplay, which would cause the presentation to suffer.
どちらにも振り切れない私はジレンマを抱えていました。
Unable to completely swing either way, I had quite the dilemma on my hands.
ここから数ヶ月、私はこの問題に対し悩み続けました。寝ても覚めても頭にテトリスのブロックが浮かんでくるのです。
I thought on this problem for the next few months. Awake or asleep, I had tetraminos floating around in my head nonstop.
迷った挙句、私はテトリスのプレイをもう一度見直すことにしました。今までテトリスを分かった気になっていたかもしれないと感じたからです。
After much soul-searching, I decided to take another look at how Tetris plays from the very beginning. I did this because I felt like, at that point, I may have had this idea in my head that I already understood Tetris.
ゲームを開始し、一つ目のテトリミノが盤面に現れ、回転、移動、設置、消去を繰り返し、クリアするまでの流れを何度もプレイしました。
So I start the game and a single tetramino appears in the matrix. I played through the process from start to finish multiple times, rotating, moving, placing, and clearing tetraminos.
この時私はゲーム中に変化していくプレイヤーの感情にフォーカスしました。
So while doing this, I focused on one particular thing, the emotions of the player and how they change as the game goes on.
すると問題解決のヒントになるようなポイントを見つけることができました。
In doing so, I came across a certain something that served as a hint in solving my dilemma.
それは集中力を使う操作の中でプレイヤーの心境に気持ちの余裕が生まれている間が存在していることでした。
That certain something was the existence of moments when the player, in the midst of doing something that requires intense concentration, is given a moment where they can breathe.
このプレイ感覚は車のドライビングをしている状態に近いと感じました。
It seemed to me like this play sensation was something similar to how people are when they're driving.
普段は前方の一点を見つめているのですが、渋滞を抜けた時や道を曲がり終えた時にふと一瞬安心するといった感覚です。
When driving, you typically focus on a single point directly ahead of you, but there is also a sensation of relief every time you find your way out of bad traffic or after completing a turn.
この時ドライバーは一瞬緊張がほぐれ、自然と周囲の風景を眺めたり、助手席のパートナーに話しかけたり、音楽をかけ始める人もいると思います。
And at those times, the driver's nerves loosen for an instant, and they unconsciously take a moment to take in the surrounding scenery, talk to the person in the passenger seat, or fiddle with the radio.
もちろん安全運転の範囲ですが。
They're still obeying the rules of the road, of course. Safety first.
私はこの快適なドライビングとはどういった体験なのかをイメージしながら、ゲーム全体の演出を見直すことにしました。
I decided to go over how everything is presented in the game, this time imagining what kind of experience a person has when they go out for a leisurely Sunday drive.
演出に使われる光、色、音、動きを プレイヤーの気持ちの開く一瞬に凝縮させました。
I took the elements that we use in the game's presentation, light, color, sound, and movement, and condensed them into those moments where the player's emotional state is such that they have room to breathe.
また、構成部のほとんどをプレイエリアの近くに配置し直し、プレイヤーがすぐに演出を感じ取れるように工夫しました。これはドライビングでドライバーが無理なく目を動かせるギリギリの距離をイメージしています。
Also, we took most of the in-game objects and rethought their placement, moving them close to the play area so that the player would immediately be able to register what they're there to convey. The idea is that they would be placed such that you, the driver in our metaphor, could effortlessly take it all in just by shifting your gaze.
これらの対応によってテトリスをプレイしながら潜在的に周りのオブジェクトや演出を把握できるような感覚が作れました。
In doing so, we were able to create a sensation that allowed players to both engage with the gameplay of Tetris, while still unconsciously internalizing the surrounding objects and effects.
これは実際のプレイヤーの感情が動くポイントをしっかりとつかむことで可能になったと言えると思います。
I think it's safe to say that this was made possible by grasping the exact point where the player's emotions are in a kind of a state of flux.
One thing too, just to add to that, from the user tests, we had an early sign that Ishihara-san was onto something here with his kind of driving model, that if stuff was in your immediate kind of peripheral vision, you could still take it in. Certain levels we had from the start where you were flying sort of into the screen. In the final game, there's like a dolphin level, the windmill level, Da Vinci, those levels. From very early on, those were the levels where users were registering what was going on in the stage, and also they really liked them. So those were some of the highest rating games and some of the ones users talked about afterwards when we talked to them about which ones were their favorites. So it was like an encouraging early sign that he was onto something.
フォーカスの問題が解決され、ビジュアルとデザインのリンクは明確に生まれました。
With the focus issue solved, we then had a definitive link between the visuals and the design.
そこでもう一つの問題であった気持ちよさをどう解決するかに取り掛かりました。
So we then got to work on focusing on the other problem we had, which was one of creating something that feels good.
ここで気持ちよさに関して少しお話ししたいと思います。
So what am I getting at when I'm talking about something feeling great?
レズインフィニットを代表するエンハンスの作品は気持ちよさを大切にしています。
And it's something that we put a lot of emphasis on when creating Res Infinite as well, which is one of Enhance's representative works.
私たちはゲームプレイ、ビジュアル、サウンドの要素の結びつきが非常に大事だと考えていて、これらの3つの要素のバランスを1対1対1にするように心がけています。
We place a great deal of importance on the linking of three elements: gameplay, visuals, and sound. And when balancing these elements, we strive to achieve a perfect ratio of 1 to 1 to 1.
そのため何かに突出させず、常に3つの気持ちよさを大きな一つと考え、そこから得られる強い快感を作るようにしています。
So for that reason, we try to make it so that no one aspect sticks out. We're conscious of these three things as one larger whole, and we aim to create games that bring out a sense of strong exhilaration that can be gained when they are functioning as one.
今回のテトリスではゲームプレイの印象が圧倒的に強かったため、それに合わせビジュアルとサウンドの存在感や表現力を上げていく必要がありました。
For Tetris Effect, the gameplay part was something that stood out as particularly overwhelming, which made it necessary to raise the level of presence and expressiveness of the visuals and sound to match. そこでフィジックスとモーフィング、この2つの機能をシナスタジアエンジンに拡張させました。So what I did was we had the Synesthesia engine expanded to include two new functions, physics and morphing. まずフィジックスの機能を拡張したことで、パーティクルや物の動き方に強さの緩急を与え、表現によりリアリティを持たせました。First, by expanding our physics functionality, we were able to give both particle and object movement a tempo that attributed a sense of strength, and that added the element of reality to our toolbox of expressions. 空気感や温度感、音の広がりや音の質感をより感じ取れるようになり、一つ一つの演出の気持ちよさが感覚にしっかりと刻まれるものとなりました。This made it easier to internalize things such as atmosphere, temperature, how sound expands and feels, and this made it easier for each and every effect to exude that feel-good sensation that we want. 次にモーフィングです。
モーフィング機能を拡張したことで、パーティクルから魚が生まれ、その後、マンタ、クジラに変化していくような展開を作れるようになりました。
And next is morphing. And by expanding morphing functionality, we were then able to create a sense of progression that emerges when a particle turns into a fish and then transforms into a manta ray or a whale.
これにより、感情のストーリー化が生まれ、気持ちの良い感情が積み重なり、それが束になることによって感動を生み出せるようになりました。
This allowed for emotions to be turned into stories. And when these pleasant emotions start to pile up and bundle together, it transforms into what we hope is a very moving experience.
This is like a chemistry. The physics that makes you feel like very emotional. The impact, like ooh, 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 and the morphing. It's a making like narrative. It's like a storytelling. So we tried to mix both.
次に、テトリスのゲームデザインに影響のない範囲で、いくつかの新要素も加えました。
And next, we added some new elements that would not have an impact on Tetris's core game design.
まず、ゲームのレベルデザインに手を入れました。
And first, we put some work into the level design.
通常のテトリスでは、プレイヤーがゲームを進めるにつれ、速度が徐々に速くなっていくということが一般的ですが、今作では速度が速くなり、遅くなり、また速くなるといった仕組みにしました。
In regular Tetris, it's normal for the speed to gradually get quicker as you progress. But for Tetris Effect, we made it such that it could, for example, speed up, slow down, and then speed up again.
こちらも先ほどと同様、演出に意識を向けたいときは速度を一度落とす。演出が浅いときはプレイに集中してもらうために速度を上げる。このような形です。
And this is done for a reason similar to what I mentioned previously. We slow things down when we want the player to be conscious of the presentation, and we speed things up so the player can focus on the game when there isn't really as much going on the presentation side of things.
もちろんこれはレベルデザイナーと私でよく話し合い、ゲームの楽しさと演出が両立できるようなバランスを取りました。
And this is, of course, something the level designer and I discussed at great length so that we could strike a balance that both makes the gameplay engaging and serves the presentation.
And yeah, just to add to that, I think this is something that seems simple, but actually took a long time, really right up until the end of the game to really keep polishing and working on what felt right and what felt unfair and what felt too crazy back and forth. Along with it too, there were a lot of questions of, in a Tetris game that has a quote unquote story mode, what does failure look like? Like what are you risking by having to continue, or can you continue? And we'd had it for a really long time. We did not want to make it something that we really wanted to keep it something that everybody could enjoy. So we had it where you could just continue and your score would reset, but the amount of lines you cleared stayed the same. And it just felt like there were no consequences at all. In fact, sometimes people would just get to a new stage and just go game over so they could kind of start fresh because they just didn't care about the score. And so that was one of the things that came on at the end is this, and also the next slide is how do we divide up the game? How do we balance the difficulty to make it where, this is not going to be a 40-hour game, whatever we do, but how do we make it where it's a satisfying, journey, kind of, so to speak, and you care when you get the game over screen, and you also care when you're able to clear it without having to continue.
最後にこのゲームはクリアに数時間を要するのですが、
And so lastly, Tetris Effect is a game that takes a few hours to finish.
ドライビングで例えると、パーキングエリアを設けるような感覚で、7つのエリアという概念を取り入れ、いつでも疲れたらゲームを中断できるような状態にしました。
But to again return things to my driving analogy, we implemented this concept of the game being split into 7 areas, along the lines of how you'll find rest stops along a highway. This lets the player step back and take a break from the game whenever they feel tired.
これにより、プレイヤーの疲労感や眠気といった問題も解決されました。
Doing this got rid of the problems we had encountered with players getting fatigued or drowsy.
こうしてテトリスと VR 演出が一つに融合し、今までにない気持ちの良いテトリス体験が完成しました。
And so all of that is how we fused Tetris and a VR presentation into this one cohesive whole, leading to the creation of what we hope you'll agree is a great feeling Tetris experience that is the first of its kind.
So the game was taking shape. We were starting to feel pretty good about it overall. We'd ask people playing the game; they were starting to feel pretty good about it overall. We were working really closely with our licensor, with the Tetris company. They had good feedback. They were helping us refine a lot of the particulars, a lot of feedback in terms of this color on that color is hard to see when this happens, and that sort of thing. They were really good about that sort of stuff, but also the very particular bits of the controls. You would think Tetris is just Tetris. You don't need to work at really fine-tuning those controls, but actually you do. That's something that took the whole length of the project. But yeah, overall, they were also really happy with how the game was shaping up. So things were going great. But there was still that concern from earlier on. And so it wasn't a new concern. It was, I had that little inner voice saying that the game still needed some kind of original gameplay hook. So here we were reinventing how Tetris looked, how it sounded, most of all how it felt. But what about how it plays? Can't we do something to innovate in terms of gameplay? Something that could add or even multiply everything else that we're doing. I just really felt the gameplay third of that graphics, sound, gameplay was lacking a little bit. And it wasn't just me. When I would talk to other people about the game, explain the game, they were into it. You could tell they were interested and excited, especially when they would play it. But they were also kind of leaning in a little bit, kind of, it seemed like waiting for one more thing. It's like, yeah, okay, yeah, and then there was not that one other thing. So we would talk about this every so often throughout the whole project. It would kind of come up to the point it became kind of a running thing, which is like, and what about that gameplay thing? Like, what are we doing for that? And Ms. and Ishihara-san were both, they did both generally agree that, yeah, it would be really awesome to have some kind of new gameplay feature that fit the game and did everything we were hoping for. But also it was kind of tempered with some concerns that maybe it wasn't strictly necessary. Maybe that could be left to some of the other modes. Maybe this game, the main mode, stays this more pure Tetris experience because, it could in fact become a bad thing. If we didn't hit it just right, it could get in the way. It could screw up what we know people already love about Tetris. And, I think Ishihara-san had a really good point, which was there have been so many Tetris games over the years, hundreds. And, how many new gameplay mechanics can you think of in that time that have stood the test of time, that you can even remember? Besides a few quality of life things like, the preview piece and the next window and some of those kind of peripheral things, but real gameplay features. And to be honest, none of us could think of any really that didn't come off as like gimmicky or kind of interesting, but ultimately very forgettable. And maybe we wouldn't come up with anything, but I did feel really strongly that we had to at least try.
はじめにテトリミノの落下スピードをスローにできたり、時間を戻せたり、盤面のテトリミノを一度すべて排除できたりといった救済システムをゲームに取り入れてみましたが、どれもテトリスのプレイに必要な緊張感が薄れてしまい、ゲームデザインとマッチしませんでした。
At the beginning, we had tried implementing systems that were essentially get-out-of-jail-free cards. You could do things like slow down the speed at which tetraminos fall, turn back time, or erase all the tetraminos in the matrix. But they didn't match well with the game design for one crucial reason. They reduced the sense of nervous tension that is necessary to make Tetris fun.
そんな中、チームのメインプログラマーからある提案がありました。テトリミノが消えなかったら面白いのではないかと言ったのです。
And as that was going on, Nishimura-san, the main programmer on the team, came to us with an idea. He said, wouldn't it be neat if the tetraminos didn't disappear?
これは一定時間テトリミノが一列揃っても消えずに蓄積されていくもので、今までは4段しか消しなかったものが8段、16段といったラインを消すことが可能になるというアイデアです。
His idea was, if you had a fixed period of time during which tetraminos would accumulate instead of disappearing when they form a line, it would be possible to jump right past the 4-line clears that Tetris players have known up to this point, allowing for players to clear 8 or even 16 lines at once.
そのメインプログラマーは開発期間中の2年間、ずっとテトリスのプレイ部分を担当している方でしたし、素晴らしい腕のプログラマーでした。その彼からの提案だったので、チームとして一度トライしてみようという流れになりました。
And this main programmer had been in charge of the actual Tetris gameplay part of the game for all 2 years of its development, and he's absolutely incredible at his craft. So we decided that if this is something that he thought would work, then we should just go ahead and give it a shot.
そして作ったものがこちらです。映像をご覧ください。
And this here is what he made. Let's take a look.
これはうまくテトリスのゲームデザインに馴染み、素晴らしい一体感を生むものになっていました。
And it fit extremely well with the game design of Tetris, and it created a wonderful sense of cohesion.
この体験はまさにゾーンという体感をうまく表現したものとなりました。
And the sensation it created was something that did a truly amazing job of expressing what it means to be in the zone.
この体験をそのままゾーンシステムと呼ぶことになり、このゲームを象徴する体験となりました。
We called it the zone system, and it became an experience that is symbolic of the title as a whole.
Great. So awesome. We all agreed. We were all fully on board with the zone system. It was basically, it had everything we were looking for. It was significant, but at the same time, it didn't get in the way of the more pure Tetris gameplay. It had benefits for beginner players and for experienced players. It looked cool. It fit the vibe of the game, everything. So it was awesome. We were feeling pretty awesome. But again, there was something else nagging. The little voice again was talking about the online multiplayer mode that we had planned. So from the very start of the game, we'd been thinking, okay, we have to have some kind of online. It's a Tetris game. We have to have some kind of online multiplayer, probably battle mode, right? So we didn't have a great idea for it as the project started, though. So we thought, okay, well, let's get into the project, and it will kind of naturally come out of making the game. But about a year in, we still didn't really have that idea. And we put out a call to the team, like, okay, we really now have to start working on that. So let's get all the ideas that you guys have. Ideally, something that breaks the mold. We wanted something different, but also that still fit the mood of the game, which is not a really easy task when the game is still called Zen Tetris and you're trying to come up with a battle mode. So all that really came back after asking was a pretty straightforward, a fairly standard one-on-one battle mode. So the team just really didn't seem into it. Like they just weren't inspired. And we didn't have, like a Tetris 99 grade awesome idea, which I think is brilliant for multiplayer. And so it felt like, it really started feeling like we were going to make this online battle mode because we had to make an online battle mode. But what if we didn't have to make an online battle mode? So something occurred to me while I was explaining all this to a friend, and saying, well, and we have an online battle mode because we have to have an online battle mode. After saying that a bunch of times, one time it finally was like, wait a second, maybe we don't. And I know some people probably here are saying like, yes, you do. You really should. You should have. You guys are idiots. But that became my pitch to Ms. and Ishihara-san. What if instead of doing that thing that other games have done that you can get online and do for free right now in a pretty good, robust, official version with like Tetris Friends and that sort of thing. What if we took that money and time and resources and instead doubled down on what was cool and unique and special about our game specifically? What would that look like? So around this time, I was using a meditation app called Headspace. It's pretty popular. Some of you might have heard of it. If you haven't, how that app is laid out is it's an app for meditating, and they basically divide up and tailor these guided audio meditations to how you're feeling or how you want to feel. So if you can't sleep or you want to sleep, if you're anxious, if you want to get energized, etc., there's separate places to go for meditations that'll address each one of those. And with Tetris Effect, we were already getting this feedback from people who were playing it, that they were responding basically the way that we were after, kind of emotionally. You know, oh, it's soothing, or oh, it was really intense, or certain levels just make them smile and laugh. So again, what if we took our battle mode resources instead and put them in a new modes designed to provoke more of those kind of feelings? And so that's where we came up with what's now effect modes. These are different categories for a bunch of different game modes that you could choose for when you wanted to relax, or you wanted to really have a challenge, or if you want to just play some old school classic Tetris, there's a place to go for that. So it wouldn't be a proper GDC speech without showing you some stuff that I think got left on the cutting room floor. So when we set about to design those new modes, we had certain ones that we knew would go in marathon, kind of the mainstay standby Tetris modes. But as far as the new modes, again, we threw it out to the team. Everybody, come up with your best, craziest, coolest, most fun ideas that fit the theme, and let's talk about them. And if it sounds good, let's prototype it. And if it's fun, let's make it. So other stuff that we ended up not going with. So we always wanted a kind of cooperative online content. We wanted people to still feel connected to each other with the theme of the game, and not in a one-on-one kind of battle scenario, but hey, we're all kind of in this together working towards some kind of communal goal. So what we ended up going with was a weekly ritual, which is where players amass points in designated modes towards a communal goal, and if they reach that goal, they get a reward. I'm kind of speeding up now because we do want to get a couple questions in for QA, so I'll kind of speed through the rest of this. But our original idea was that those communal cleared Tetris pieces were all going to gather into like a sculpture. And if you completed the sculpture, then it would animate in some weird, hopefully fun, surprising way. The problem with this was we were going to run this weekly, and we just couldn't think of like 52 good things that made sense in the game. It's kind of like, wait, what's going on again now? What game are we making? But it was kind of funny, and sadly, though, we had to kill our dancing astronaut. Sorry, dancing astronaut. Game name, okay, this part I'm gonna really speed through. The game was called Zen Tetris since forever. We liked it. It was different from other Tetris games. Here's some of the logos. But as you see, once we started making the logo, it was like, wait a second. Zen does mean relaxation, but it also means kind of simple and austere to a lot of people. And our game is giant space whales made out of particles exploding literally into rainbows on the beat. Like, is this the logo to that game? I don't think so. So yeah, other logo treatments. It wasn't good, and in Japanese Zen, while it would have worked, kind of has this old feeling to it as well, which was what we were going for. This, at least, we did stumble on while we were doing this kind of things. We ended up using this for the subtitle, which was perfect for Tetris Effect. But the point of this part is that for a different conversation, in the marketing conversation that I was having with another guy at Enhance, Yamada-san, about the marketing of the game, we kept going back to this Tetris Effect. So the marketing for Zen Tetris was going to use the Tetris Effect because it was a very positive thing that the game had. You know, the Tetris Effect, if you don't know, Tetris gets in your brain and you can't get rid of it. And it actually has all these health benefits that have been scientifically proven. It can lessen the severity of PTSD, even one of the most recent studies, but distract from cravings, increase the size of parts of the brain, etc. We kept coming back to that Tetris Effect. Let's make a documentary about the Tetris Effect. Let's have an ad where it's like, ask your doctor if the Tetris Effect is right for you, like that kind of thing. And Yamada-san is just like, wait, why aren't we calling the game Tetris Effect? We keep talking about Tetris Effect. And it was kind of like, now it's like, duh, yeah, of course. But we had been thinking of it for so long as Zen Tetris. Also, we thought there might be legal reasons why we couldn't do that. But Miz got it immediately. He loved it. Ishihara loved it. Tetris Company was fully behind it. So we changed that at the very last second and got a logo that was much closer to kind of what we were going for. So, oh boy, real quick, final thoughts. So my final thoughts are basically listen to your inner voice by giving an outer voice. So talk things over with the team. If you're hearing something, there's two voices in my experience, inner voices. One is this intuitive, really smart, positive thing that knows better what's going on than you do. The other is, just doubt and fear and doubting everything. And so my method of separating those two things is to talk it out with other people. And sometimes, like I gave the example of the name, they'll have better ideas. Other times, just in explaining it to somebody, you end up thinking of something. And so definitely listen to that inner voice, but to kind of separate it, try talking it over with somebody else. And Ishihara-san.
最後に、今回 VR に関してですが、テトリスと VR を融合させる上で、開発側にさまざまな表現の調整や歩み寄りが必要となりました。これはとても大変なことでした。
To close things out, on the VR side of things, creating a fusion of Tetris and VR required a great deal of work on the development side to fine-tune the presentation and a whole lot of compromise as well. The whole thing was quite the ordeal.
しかし今回作品を作り切って感じたことは、決してそれらの苦労がマイナスではなくプラスだと感じました。
This time, however, having finished making it, I feel like those difficulties were not minuses, but pluses.
既存の 2D ベースのゲームであっても VR 演出や VR 空間へ誘うポイントを見つけたり、またはそのような場面を新たに設けることで魅力的な VR コンテンツへと変化させていける可能性を秘めていると思います。
I believe that even existing games built on 2D foundations have the potential to be transformed into appealing VR content so long as you can find something that can be used to connect it with a VR presentation or place it in a VR space. Or if you have no entry point that seems to exist already, you can create one from scratch.
VR では 2D では味わえない次元の違う素晴らしい感動を与えてくれます。
VR is capable of inspiring a whole new dimension of emotions that can't be experienced in 2D.
現在ゲーム業界における VR タイトルの数がまだまだ少ない印象を受けます。
And at the moment, I feel like the game industry is still sorely lacking in VR titles.
今回私がお伝えしたお話で何か皆さんにとって良いノウハウとなりましたら個人的に大変嬉しく思います。
It would be great if some of what I've shared today turned out to be a little bits of good know-how for all of you out there. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is a pretty long journey for us. And yeah, so we had many things. We started from kind of a Zen feel good game, but we decided to mix the new elements. And yeah, this is all the time, the game production is like that, isn't it? Yeah. So, and we learned a lot. We tried to mix I think the two elements. I'm talking about the zone, So we wanted to make a very relaxing, feel-good game. And the other hand, it's kind of like excitement. We needed to combine both. And so I learned about the zone mechanism. So zone mechanism, you are in the zone when you are in a zone. So you are kind of the between relax and excitement. So it's very small, tiny zone, but yeah, we learned a lot, about that. Oh, wow. So we can make that kind of a feel, using the power of the visual and sounds, and also, Tetris game mechanism. So, yeah, I can say to you, we can have much more space to explore, using the technology, even if thinking about the VR, AR, MR, XR technology, this is 3D experience, experiential we can create. So this is a new era. So, but, we have the bunch of space. This is a white snow, and this is the big journey and explore. So, but we need to go there, to make the new kind of experience. The game has a 50 years history, and the movie has a 130 years history. But the first people, tried to make a new something. So we are facing to the next era. I mean, experiential era. So yeah, it's a really exciting thing. And also, I want to thank to my team, Monsters and the Resonator. So there was a really good team, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had the long history. You know, we made a Resident Infinite, and that kind of experience, we could go to the next step. And of course, we want to go to the next step.
That's right.
In the future.
From here.
Yeah, and yeah, I want to thank to Tetris company. Yeah, so we want to prove, you know, even if the old famous IP like Tetris, it's like a complete game, nothing add. But is it true? You know, we wanted to prove that. You know, if we can.
Yeah. Is it true that you can't add anything to it's already
Yeah.
perfect? There's nothing more that can really be done with it. And I think hopefully us and also now Tetris 99 have proved that
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's just
Yeah.
a matter of imagination.
As total new experience, you know, we are making the new experience, right? We are experienced designer, isn't it? Yeah. Thank you very much.